The Crow, 1989, is a comic book series created by James O'Barr following the untimely and tragic death of his fiancée. It is a heady, gothic tale of loss and love, interposed with inserts of poetry and lyrics from Joy Division and The Cure. Its protagonist, Eric, is a tortured soul, racked by grief and guilt, even as he hunts down and eliminates those responsible for the death of his fiancée, one at a time, in an ever more violent spiral of vengeance, guided by a supernatural crow. The Crow, 1994, is a film adaptation of the book, directed by Alex Proyas. Although it makes some changes, it is a more or less faithful adaptation of the source material, carrying across the romance and tragedy of the comic. A dark, noirish action thriller, it has since achieved cult status and spawned a number of increasingly poor sequels and a forgotten TV show. The Crow, 2024, is a shameless abomination of a movie. It shares very little with the 1989 comic or the 1994 version in either content or theme. It was a massive failure on release after being in pre-production hell for many years. Going through a number of lead actors and writers, it was not worth it. It should have stayed in hell. Now, I'm going to compare all of these crows in detail. Fair warning, this is going to be murder. I'm going to do this in 15-minute installments for the movies, and a book at a time for the J. O. Barr graphic novel, which is effectively split up into 5 books: Pain, Fear, Irony, Despair, and Death. These are then split into many sections and chapters and even sub-chapters. They're not of equal length, and the chronology is all over the place. There are many flashbacks, and it is chaotic in sequence as the action within its pages. Here we go. 1989. The first sequence in the book is essentially a prologue, with Eric interrogating a thug called Jones Transfer for information on the location of his targets: Tom Tom, Top Dollar, Funboy, and T-Bird. He threatens torture to get what he wants and is stabbed by Jones, to no effect. He then leaves a defeated Transfer to pass on a message that he is coming for them. The book then cuts to a dream sequence where Eric is on a train and sees a white horse get tangled up in barbed wire. A crow tells a distraught Eric that he shouldn't have looked. We then proceed into Book 1, Pain. Keeping things brief, Eric is in a house alone, reflecting. He will do this throughout the comic a lot. We then cut to Tom Tom, who hooks Tintin, really James, what is it with these names, up with a gun from a guy called Ratso. Tintin murders a woman and then Ratso with the gun. Eric confronts and kills Tintin, killing him with his own weapon while quoting scripture. He makes Tintin remember the assault beforehand and the killing, which we haven't seen yet, but he mentions that it was a broken down car on a dirt highway. Back at the house, Eric dwells on thoughts of pain and loss and ties a spent shell in his hair. Number 1, he says, as he mournfully looks out of the window. We then cut to a gang meeting where they're discussing the death of Tintin. Eric gatecrashes the meeting and kills everyone. Once again, he makes Top Dollar remember the crime before shooting him in the head. And that is the end of Book 1. Back at the house again, Eric relives a memory of him and Shelley painting their house, the very house that he is in. In the present, he sits at a candlelit dinner for 2 and gives the departed Shelley a cat called Gabriel that followed him home. We see that he proposed to Shelley while decorating, and he tortures himself with memories of them together. The crow tells him not to look, as she is killed in his memory by a gun-toting skeleton cowboy. 1994. The film opens with a sweeping shot of a city, blazing with many small fires. As the camera passes over the city, a voiceover informs us of the legend of the crow that bears souls to the land of the dead. But sometimes something so bad happens that the soul cannot rest. and that sometimes, just sometimes, that soul comes back to put the wrong things right. The camera then moves through a shattered window to a police officer, Albrecht, who is overseeing a crime scene. A woman lies on the floor, bloodied. A man lies dead on the street below. We are informed that they are a couple, Shelley Webster and Eric Draven, and they were due to be married the next day. As the woman is moved to an ambulance, a young girl explains that she is their friend, that they looked after her. The police officer tells the girl, Sarah, that Shelley, the victim, will be okay. Sarah says that he is lying. We cut to a year later. Now we're only 5 minutes into the movie at this point. Sarah is laying flowers at the grave of Eric and Shelley. A crow appears as Sarah leaves and taps at Eric's headstone with its beak. Sarah skateboards off in the rain. We cut to a stand where Albrecht is getting a hot dog. He buys one for Sarah and we get some great character development. We're 7 minutes in. A group of thugs sets a bomb in a game arcade. Whooping and shouting, they get in a car and speed off. As this happens, Eric bursts from his grave. He wanders off in the rain and salvages some clothes and boots from a dumpster. As the bomb explodes and Albrecht runs off to investigate, Eric slowly makes his way back to his home where he was murdered, guided by the Crow. Here, he endures a horrific flashback of Shelley's brutal assault and rape and his murder. It is worth noting that this was the scene where Brandon Lee was killed, but that footage was destroyed and a body double was then used to recreate his scenes as a flashback with some facial CGI. Eric reenacts his killing, but as he is thrown out of the window in the flashback, he instead grasps the frame of the window, cutting his hands on broken glass. We see that his wounds heal almost instantly. Cutting back to the gang that we now know are the perpetrators of the atrocity, we see they are in a bar called The Pit, where they are drinking shots and swallowing bullets. A woman comes over and asks them to put away their guns. She's obviously in a relationship with one of them. And that's it. 15 minutes in, and we already have so much information, having been introduced to about 70% of the characters that are in this film. This early section does a lot of work in setting up the story to come, choosing to do so in a more linear aspect than the book. However, though no scenes here are actually from the book, it is inserting monologues and even poetry to keep it in line with O'Barr's original work, 2024. We follow a young boy carrying groceries walking along a muddy lane. He cries out as he sees a white horse tangled in barbed wire. We cut to an emaciated-looking woman unconscious in a trailer. As he tries to free the horse, he cuts his hands on the barbed wire. The horse dies, and the boy is reflected in its eyes as a flock of crows wheels overhead. We then cut to a woman in an apartment watching a mobile phone video. We see that she is in the video, which appears to be of some kind of gathering, but then something violent happens, which we hear but do not see on the screen. The woman then makes a phone call to someone called Zadie, and we see that her name comes up as Shell on Zadie's phone. Shell asks Zadie where she got the tape, and it transpires that they're going to try to use it as evidence against someone. Zadie is then abducted by an unknown man and woman in a home. Shell then calls someone called Dom, who filmed the video, and then she says that she's going to Zadie's home to check on her. She locks her phone in a safe and leaves in the rain, as a man who is watching her gets out of a car and follows her. She runs into a couple of police officers, apparently intentionally, and she is arrested for drug possession when narcotics spill from her handbag. The man walks past as she is taken into custody. We then cut to a tattooed man taking a shower. We can see that barbed wire and poetry feature among his incredibly crude body art. The shot then cuts to a recovery centre, and everyone is wearing pink jumpsuits. The tattooed man, Eric, is being bullied by a bunch of inmates. We see scars on his hand, telling us that this is the boy that tried to save the horse. The film cuts back to that scene because it thinks the audience is stupid. We see a flashback that suggests his mother might have been abusive, before we cut again to a drug therapy group session. We're 8 minutes into the film. The therapist quotes Hemingway before we cut again to Eric in his cell, testing the sharpness of a razor blade that has been attached to something, presumably as an improvised weapon. We see that Eric's cell is covered in drawings. Eric goes to his door window as Shelley walks past, and their eyes meet. Eric sits and draws in his cell as Shelley is put in hers. We then cut to a scene where, at a high-class gathering, a young musician is introduced to a Mr. Rogue. The blonde woman who abducted Sadie then comes up to him and draws him away. In a basement room, he interrogates Sadie, telling her that he has killed hundreds of innocents over the centuries and that he has to keep sending innocents to hell as the bad people are already going to hell. He must corrupt souls. By sacrificing these innocents, he keeps himself free from hell. He then speaks into Sadie's ear and she kills herself with a blade. This is appropriate because at this point I am also losing the will to live. That, more or less, is 15 minutes. And the difference here is just staggering. Whereas the book hasn't really got going yet due to its fractured narrative, the 1994 film has already laid out the basis of the plot. Revenge. What is being avenged? And it introduces us to many of the lead characters with some nice little moments of character building. The 2024 film, by contrast, has doled out a tragic backstory, a MacGuffin, the phone, and a mystery box, all classic modern writing tropes. Throw in a nonsensical magical bad guy and two protagonists that we basically know nothing about and don't care about, and the omens are not good. Proyas' film had sweeping shots, a dark, moody ambience, and heaps of tragedy. We know this young couple, Shelley Webster and her rock and roll boyfriend, have been killed the night before their wedding. We know they are poor, but good people. They look after Sarah, after all, and that they were killed violently and viciously. We know that Eric has come back from the dead 1 year on, and that he will be seeking vengeance. At this early stage, I do have to confess, however, that with The White Horse in Barbed Wire, the remake does actually have more in common with the book. But trust me, that is all about to change. Let's carry on. 1989. Book 2. Fear. Skank and Tom Tom abuse a man with Down syndrome. Yes, really. When Eric kills them both, decapitating Skank and fatally wounding Tom Tom with a samurai sword. Before Tom Tom dies, Eric makes him tell him what he did with the engagement ring that he gave to Shelley. Tom Tom tells him that T-Bird sells all ill-gotten gains at Gideon's pawn shop. Eric then heads to Gideon's to retrieve the ring, and this scene plays out almost exactly like the 1994 film, panel for panel, except that Eric kills Gideon before setting a bomb. He is then confronted by Officer Albrecht in the shop. He gets Albrecht to give a message to the police captain, Hook, yes, Captain Hook, informing him of his intentions. The shop then blows up. The chapter then ends with the lyrics from a Cure song. 1994. Like the book, Eric dwells on memories of Shelley. In the apartment, he looks through photos and remembers their love. In a sudden burst of rage, he shatters the mirror in front of him and applies makeup while the Cure plays. He then dons all black clothing and pets a white cat before standing in the window looking out on the city as lightning flashes, lighting up his face. You can see here that this is a body double with Brandon Lee's face superimposed, but this is 30 years old. We then cut to a scene in a pawn shop where Tintin is selling stolen goods to an unscrupulous dealer, Gideon. Tintin leaves, counting his money. Eric is on the hunt. The crow guides him to Tintin, and we get some great shots of Tintin from a crow's perspective. Eric confronts and kills Tintin, and some of the dialogue is taken from the comic. In this version, Eric kills Tintin with his own knives, saying, "Victims, aren't we all?" Like the book, Eric makes him recall the crime. Eric then takes Tintin's trench coat. Back to the gang now. They're reporting to their boss. T-Bird instead has to make do with his right-hand man, as the top man is in a meeting. A band plays in the background. This will be a recurring motif, adding to the hard goth rock feel of the movie. And this is where we're introduced to Top Dollar, the main antagonist of the film, superbly played by Michael Wincott. He lies next to a dead woman. His sister, Micah, who he is clearly in an incestuous sexual relationship with, takes a knife and prepares to cut out the woman's eyes. This is another departure, as in the book, Top Dollar is just another gang member, and he's already dead. However, this adaptation needed a central bad guy, and you won't get better than Michael Wincott in one of his most iconic roles. We'll then cut to Sarah skating in the rain. She goes to find her mother in a bar called The Pit. She's busy with one of the gang, Funboy. And we can see here that she neglects Sarah, although she does give her some money for food. Funboy mocks Sarah before heading upstairs with Sarah's mother, Darla. Eric goes to Gideon's pawn shop. Here, he confronts Gideon over all the lives that he helped destroy and recovers an engagement ring, remembering his romantic candlelit proposal to Shelley in the attic of their apartment. He tells Gideon to pass on a message that Eric Draven sends his regards before blowing up his shop with rings loaded into a shotgun, firing at kerosene he has poured over the premises liberally. Gideon survives by escaping out the back door. 2024. Eric and Shelley continue to bond over bad jokes, films, and shared trauma. Shelley visits Eric in his cell and admires his poetry and drawings. This is despite earlier one of the guards saying that the girls and boys can't mix. Whatever. When the people who abducted Zadie turn up looking for Shelley, the two escape, because apparently it is that easy. Apparently it's also fine for opposite sexes to go off on their own, as they have tags on their ankles, which they remove with the razor that Eric improvised. This film's really dumb. They hitch a ride on a pickup and then go into the city, still wearing all their rehab gear. Okay? Shelley goes to the apartment of a friend, which they then trash in a drug-filled sex orgy. I'm not sure how this is meant to endear us to these characters, but blissfully, all this nonsense takes us up to the 30-minute mark, if you include a scene which informs us that they are still being hunted by the bad guys. I told you this goes off the rails. Zero resemblance to the book or the 94 film. The basis of their relationship is shown as lust and a mutual appreciation for narcotics, not any kind of romance. FKA Twigs can't act. Bill Skarsgård definitely can, but he just isn't. You do not have any investment in their love, even though they've dominated the screen time. At this point, the film just feels like a gaping hole, void of anything resembling character or a plot. 1989. Eric sits with Gabriel the cat, reminiscing about a Christmas with Shelley. He tells her that they've bought a house for Christmas. In the present, Eric then goes to confront Funboy and meets a dishevelled girl called Sherry, whose mother is upstairs with Funboy. After talking to her for a little bit, he gives her Shelley's engagement ring. He then goes upstairs and confronts Funboy. He heals Sherry's mother, Sandy, and then tells Funboy to meet him at the gin mill with his friends at midnight. Eric then takes some of Funboy's morphine and leaves him. Back at the house, Eric tortures himself once again with intimate memories of Shelley. The Crow admonishes him, and we can see that Eric has been using Funboy's morphine to deal with his pain. Thus ends Book 2. In 1994, Eric is confronted by Albrecht, much like in the book, but outside the store after it's blown up. Some of the dialogue is actually identical. The main difference here, though, is that Eric tells Albrecht of his intentions directly. He's going to kill the men that killed Shelley Webster. They're dead already. They just don't know it yet. As Eric disappears into the night, we cut to Top Dollar and his sister. T-Bird reports that Gideon's has burned down and that Tintin has been killed. Eric saves Sarah from being run over on a street. After a brief exchange, Sarah realises that he's actually Eric, but he has already disappeared. Albrecht is investigating the murder of Shelley and Eric, something that he's been busted for before. He has drawn Crow makeup on an old band photo of Eric Draven. The Crow guides Eric to Funboy, who is injecting morphine with Sarah's mother, Darla. Eric confronts Funboy, and Funboy shoots him through the hand. It heals instantly, and Eric quotes a joke from the comic. Eric then incapacitates Funboy with his own gun and grabs Darla, squeezing the morphine from her arm while telling her that her daughter is on the streets and to go to her. He then kills Funboy with his own morphine, leaving the needles arranged in the shape of a crow. Now, it is worth noting that at this point, this scene is heavily changed from the intended. Due to Lee's death, the scene had to be altered. Originally, Funboy was due to attack Eric with a razor and wound him, as Eric was meddling in the affairs of the living and therefore wasn't invulnerable at that moment by helping Darla. This is why, after this scene, Eric will be bound up in black tape. Our 15 minutes takes us to Top Dollar's henchman, investigating Funboy's corpse on the floor and seeing Eric Draven disappear out of the window. 2024. Eric and Shelley make some music together and then go to a nightclub, keeping a massively low profile by going out in public. One of Shelley's friends, Dom, tells her that Zadie is dead, and they go back to Eric's apartment. They are then both ambushed and murdered by their pursuers, and FK Twigs gives her most convincing performance, as a corpse. They are both murdered by suffocation with plastic bags and then dumped into a river. Eric is not dead for some reason, and after failing to save Shelley from the water, he emerges from a lake. He sees an old man and follows him. The old man quotes Sarah's line from the beginning of the 1994 version. He then pushes Eric into a puddle, yes, a puddle, and Eric wakes up in his own apartment. A police officer appears and shoots Eric. He then starts looking for the MacGuffin cell phone. Eric isn't dead though, and after a violent, bloody fight, kills a police officer with a knife. It's one of those one stab to the abdomen and you're dead affairs. Eric then slowly heals, but it's obvious that he is in a lot of pain. He then wanders off into the rainy streets. This is getting really hard to watch. And not just for the over-the-top, bloody, gratuitous gore and violence. It's just bad. Anyway. 1989. Book 3. Irony. Eric doses up on morphine and heads out to Funboy's party at the gin mill. He kills everyone apart from Funboy in a shootout while quoting scripture, and tells Funboy to fetch T-Bird and to meet him at the site of the atrocity. Funboy confesses that he knows he's a monster and that he does bad things, but he just accepts it, and he isn't sorry that he raped Shelley's corpse. Eric promises him that his death will be quick and clean, but T-Bird's will not. Back at the house, Eric once again reminisces about the good old times with Shelley and slices his arms with razors. Honestly, it's getting a bit emo. And that's book 3. 1994. Eric goes to visit Albrecht. Albrecht tells him of the aftermath of what happened that night. Eric absorbs the memory from Albrecht, and we find out that Shelley Webster died after 30 hours in intensive care, and that Albrecht stayed with her the whole time, and that he was busted for investigating the murders. We also find out that he and his wife are separated. Eric leaves after telling him that nothing is trivial. The little things matter. Gideon is relaying Eric's message to Top Dollar. After interrogating Gideon, Top Dollar stabs Gideon with a sword and then shoots him, just to be sure. We cut to Eric playing guitar on the roof of his apartment. Sarah goes back to hers. She pulls out one of Eric's band records and the player skips on a line that he said to her in the street. The Crow flies off and finds Skank and T-Bird. Skank is in a shop getting road beers when Eric abducts T-Bird and makes him drive off in his own car. Skank steals a car and then follows them. Skank catches up just in time to see Eric blow T-Bird up in his car with his own explosives. The hour mark ends with Top Dollar's henchman investigating Eric's disturbed grave. 1 hour in, and it's almost the perfect second act. Eric has now disposed of several of the gang and is homing in on his final targets. Meanwhile, Top Dollar is finding out more about his adversary. We've had loads of great character development, and we're invested in the fates of all concerned, mainly because they're good people. Let's get back to that piece of shit 2024 version, shall we? 2024. Eric goes to the bridge where he and Shelley were dumped. He jumps in and ends up back talking to the old man. The old man informs him that basically Eric's in limbo and that Shelley's soul is headed to hell. He can get their lives back by killing Rogue, who's not meant to be in the world of the living. If their love remains pure, then Eric can't die. He pushes Eric back into the puddle and bang! Eric is back in the world of the living. He goes to Dom's apartment and gets a gun from him and some ammo, and then the scene ends. We then cut to Shelley's funeral, and Eric interrogates Shelley's mother back at their apartment, getting information about her killers. Eric finds a clue and then goes to find the man that killed him to get the names of his accomplices, but he kills himself instead. Eric just gets the name from his phone. So exciting. He then sees more of the people who killed him and Shelley leave the building in front of him, convenient, and jumps through their windscreen, hilariously resulting in a prolonged action scene in the back of the car, before he is finally kicked out and lies bleeding in the road, broken and shattered, being run over by a truck. We then see him graphically heal. We aren't yet at the hour mark. Rogue goes to visit Shelley's mother and makes her throw herself out of the window after getting details out of her about Eric. Was she an innocent? Hardly. She gave her daughter up in exchange for material benefits. Oh well, who cares? Certainly not me. Useful bit of exposition for a film that doesn't know how to do anything else. Now we're 1 hour in. The bad guy knows he's been hunted by a dead man, but there's so little investment in the characters because there aren't any characters. 1989, Book 4, Despair. And this is where we finally see what happened to Eric and Shelley. The atrocity. When their car breaks down after a day out, they encounter T-Bird and his gang, all high on drugs. They attack and shoot Eric in the head. And then, while he lays there paralysed, they assault and rape Shelley. When her screaming becomes too much, Tom Tom stomps on her before T-Bird shoots her in the head. Then Funboy takes his turn. All through this, we see the Crow telling Eric not to look as he lies there. The gang then drive off before Funboy has finished, leaving him to walk home. We then see that it is Eric in this version who went into surgery, visited by Captain Hook. He dies on the operating table. We then cut to Eric in the house, suiting up for the final act as he burns every memory of Shelley. We see that there are 3 shells in his hair. The final shot of Book 4, Despair, is the house burning behind him, Gabriel sitting on his shoulder. 1994. Sarah wakes up to a now clean and sober Darla cooking her breakfast. They finally bond as mother and daughter. Meanwhile, Albrecht is suspended and Sarah goes to visit Eric and Shelley's apartment, where Eric has been burning photos while reminiscing about Shelley. He hides when she enters, but eventually appears to her. They embrace. Later, Sarah and Albrecht discuss having seen Draven while sitting at the hot dog stand. Top Dollar is holding a meeting of all of his lieutenants. Eric gatecrashes the meeting, and what follows is an epic action shootout that the Wachowskis were surely eyeing, where Eric kills the entire room when they deny him skank. Top Dollar and his sister and the right-hand man escape, and Eric gets what he thinks is his final revenge on Skank, throwing him out of a window just like he himself was killed. 2024. Eric finds Dom, gets information out of him about the phone video and tells him to get out of town. He finds the phone, it was in a safe, don't forget, he gets it no problem, and watches the video. It shows Shelley being compelled to kill another girl by Rogue. Eric's faith in Shelley wavers. He goes back to the place where he got the gun and they are ambushed by Rogue's men. Eric is shot with a shotgun. Because his faith in Shelley has wavered, he ends up back in limbo. He is told he failed because his love didn't remain pure and that now she will be condemned for eternity. He offers his soul for hers, and the Crows give him the power and resurrect him again. And now he finally turns into the Crow that we know with the makeup and everything. Eric wakes up in the bath and kills everyone in a bloody, gratuitous display of violence. He again gets a clue from a phone. So sick of phones in this. Telling him that his quarry will be at the opera. He heads off for his final revenge, but not before giving himself a tattoo, of course, and redoing his face paint. So, both the films are setting up the final act, but the difference here is that Eric hasn't actually achieved anything. In fact, he's only become the Crow due to some ill-conceived meandering about the nature of his and Shelley's love, which is the least convincing love story since Twilight. It has barely anything to do with J.O. Barr's book, and a complete lack of anything resembling investment or stakes or a human viewpoint is absolutely staggering. There is none of the romance that steeps the pages of the comic or the 94 original. This is a brutish, vulgar take with few, if any, redeeming values. But at least it's almost over. 1989, Book 5, Death. Eric goes to say goodbye to Sherry. He calls her Princess, and she calls him Mr. Clown. He tells her that he'll see her in heaven. We cut to the burning house. Captain Hook is there, and there is a note leaving Gabriel to him and saying that Gabriel is pregnant. Captain Hook hates cats. Albrecht has a note as well, asking him to look out for Sherry where he can. Funboy has failed to convince T-Bird to go to the rendezvous. Eric finds him, and Funboy again says he wishes he was sorry for what he's done, but he's not. Eric instructs him to take all of his morphine and overdose, granting the painless death he promised. Funboy does so, and dies. Eric hunts down T-Bird, killing his foot soldiers as he does so. He finally chases T-Bird down in a car chase, making him crash at the very spot where the atrocity took place. He then kills T-Bird with a hammer. This done, he returns to his grave, his task complete. 1994. Assuming that he is done, Eric goes back to his grave and finds Sarah waiting for him. He gives her Shelley's ring, just like in the comic. Sarah is then abducted by Top Dollar to bait Eric. Entering the church, the Crow, which Micah has revealed is the source of Eric's power, is shot by Top Dollar's henchman, Grange. Robbing Eric of his invulnerability, Top Dollar shoots Eric, who doesn't heal. Before they can kill the Crow, Albrecht bursts into the church and saves Eric, killing Grange. Eric and Albrecht then go after Top Dollar, who has Sarah. Top Dollar's sister shoots Albrecht on the way up, but then has her eyes pecked out by the wounded Crow. She falls to her death. Eric then has a final confrontation with Top Dollar. Although he is beaten, Top Dollar informs him that it was he that ordered their deaths. He is Eric's true quarry. Eric then uses the memory of Sarah's pain and suffering to incapacitate Top Dollar and hurl him to his death from the church roof. After saving Sarah, Eric leaves her with the wounded Albrecht and goes back to Shelley's grave, where he is reunited with her at last. Finally, the Crow gives Shelley's ring back to Sarah after Top Dollar had stolen it from her, as she visits their once again undisturbed graves. Right, let's finish 2024. At the opera, Eric kills a load of exclusively white security guards in what can only be described as an orgy of samurai sword violence, in a rather brutal and rather daft action scene interspersed with shots of the opera that is playing. While somewhat numbing, it is at least artistic and competently shot, despite being gratuitous to the extreme. He then finds the blonde woman Marion, but because she isn't a man, he just decapitates her off screen. He then goes down to the stage while the cast of the opera are taking their bows, and throws the heads into the crowd.
Because that's what heroes do.
He then drives to Rogue's house. Rogue tries to use his magic to take the Crow's power, but Eric remembers that he loves Shelley, and somehow throws Rogue into limbo, where he is promptly taken to hell. Shelley is brought back, and she wakes up next to Eric's corpse. The paramedic that revived her is the old man from Limbo. Eric stays in Limbo doing, whatever the sequel was supposed to have him do. Not that there will be a sequel. The film barely made back half of its $50 million budget and deservedly flopped at the box office, disappearing out of the top 10 after a week. So, with that out of the way, let's start the comparisons. The book is basically the author's anguish and pain from bereavement, manifest in ink. Much of the story is taken up by Eric languishing in the house where he and Shelley lived. He self-medicates, he self-harms, and he perpetuates his own misery as he dwells upon thoughts of the past, even as the Crow tells him to not look. Eric's catharsis comes from vengeance as he tracks down those responsible for his pain and kills them, as well as anyone in his way. This in no way lessens his agony, even as he ties the spent shells in his hair to mark his successes. The randomness of the atrocity, with no rhyme or reason, also adds to the tragedy. Added to this, the fact that Eric had to witness the whole thing, even if he was told not to look. Religion plays a large part in the book, with Eric quoting scripture and lambasting God for allowing Shelley's fate. Obar's love of 80s goth rock is also evident, with lyrics from The Cure and Joy Division, adding to the morose atmosphere of the book. The stark black and white art contributes to this, with flashbacks and dreams created in a softer, different, more grayscale art style. When it comes to the 1994 adaptation, there are significant changes. One of the most immediately obvious is the atrocity itself. The rather scattered narrative of the book is tightened and reinforced with an overarching narrative of organised crime and the character of Top Dollar. Therefore, Eric and Shelley's deaths become a more deliberate act, rather than a random happenstance drive-by by a drunken gang. One thing that has been very much toned down is Eric's self-flagellation and drug use. In fact, he abhors drugs in this film. There are moments of self-imposed anguish and pain from recalling happier times with Shelley, but they are more infrequent and brief than those in the book. Likewise, the religious aspect of the book is absent, with Eric Draven, as he's named in the film, reimagined as a rocker with a band and album. This forms much of the core of the film's atmosphere, giving a dark and foreboding vibe that comes across in limited form in the book. Even the flashbacks in the film are of a romantic, darkly lit music video vibe compared to O'Barr's contemporary and bright presentations. Likewise, a lot of work has been done with the characters, not least the gang members. This is quite possibly the most impressive change, as apart from Funboy, few of them have more than a line or two in the book. The film makes them all characters in their own right, giving each additional screen time and traits, and a loose camaraderie that allows for additional characterisation based upon their disparate personalities. Top Dollar goes from just another gang member to the overall head of an organised crime syndicate. He is superbly portrayed by the inimitable Michael Wincott, one of the all-time great character actors. He's bored, tired of doing the same old thing over and over again, and Eric has put a smile back on his face. Eric himself is also a more rounded character, given additional traits and nuances, although much of the book's theme has been captured. Brandon Lee gives Draven an altruistic avenging angel angle, almost an anti-hero who will make decisions that will hinder him in his given task, even at his own risk. Now, it's at this point, before I move on to the side characters, that we should address that as amazing as the film is, it is heavily compromised. This is, of course, due to the death of Brandon Lee, a blow from which few productions could emerge unscathed. In this case, whole sections of the film were excised and a character removed: the Skull Cowboy. The Skull Cowboy was meant to serve as a guide or mentor in the film, as having a talking crow, like in the comic, might somewhat dilute the serious nature that Alex Proyas was striving for. He would deliver information that would later be converted to off-screen monologues and tell Eric that messing in the affairs of the living will not be tolerated, keeping him on his path of vengeance. When Eric goes to rescue Sarah from Top Dollar, he is admonished by the Skull Cowboy and informed if he meddles in the affairs of the living, he will bleed. He will lose his powers of invulnerability.
Quit screwing around. Your job is done. The problems of the living are not your concern.
It's not that easy. Get out of my way.
You risked everything. I took that risk and lost.
That's your story.
And you'll go as a mortal alone.
I'm already alone.
Then choose. Choose and be damned.
The removal of the Skull Cowboy meant that another vulnerability needed to be found for Eric, thus the conceit of the Crow being the centre of Eric's power. With a reworked script, the film was finished after an additional injection of cash from Miramax, who also picked up the distribution rights after Paramount dropped out. The changed narrative meant some additional scenes needed to be removed, such as where Funboy attacks Eric while he's helping Darla. Much of the film remained intact though, with Lee's remaining scenes being completed with his stunt double and facial replacement. Although it can look a little crude in places, it is a compromise that allowed the film to be completed, and is therefore understandable. Anyway, back to the characters. The secondary characters received as much enhancement as the main cast. In particular, Sarah takes the place of Sherry and becomes the human heart and perspective of the film, abandoned and neglected by her mother and adopted unofficially by Eric and Shelley. This is important, as this simple line early on from Sarah shows us that Eric and Shelley were good people, making us care for them.
Shelley just takes care of me. She's my friend. Her and Eric.
It's an effective piece of writing that the 2024 version will completely eschew. Eric helps Sarah, and also Albrecht, who also forms part of the human core of the film, acting as a confidant and allowing Eric to relive Shelley's suffering. This allows him to defeat Top Dollar in the film's climax. The two characters complement Eric's benevolent wraith, adding a heart and soul that is largely absent from the haunting pages of O'Barr's book. Changes aside, the film does follow the book for the most part, with some scenes actually being a lavish, some might say slavish, recreation of panels from the comic. With its additional material content, however, I do think in this instance that the adaptation trumps and improves upon the source material, apart from 2 points. 1. I think the reversal of fates, with Eric being killed and Sarah being the one to die in surgery, robs Eric of the ability to witness the full extent of the atrocity. This adds to the tragedy inherent in Eric's painful existence, and the change shifts the perspective of this tragedy to the narrative's detriment, in my opinion. The only other change that I feel is inferior to the book is the character Micah. Although the creation of Top Dollar as Eric's nemesis is an improvement, I'm not sure that he needed a sister or an incestuous relationship to be reviled as a character. Potentially she was added to reinforce the magical nature of the Crow's powers, which she covets. I couldn't really find any material from the scriptwriter's intentions regarding Micah, but I suppose with the loss of the Skull Cowboy, that would make sense. Overall, I do have to say that I think the film is actually an improvement over the original material, less ethereal and fractured, and with better developed and realised characters that allows for a deeper sense of involvement from the audience. Sadly, the 2024 film destroys all of this, and is one of the worst adaptations I have ever seen, to the extent that it can barely be described as such. In fact, the only real similarity that it bears to the source material is this panel featuring the White Horse that was entirely absent from the 94 film. That, and perhaps the fact that the main character takes drugs. He doesn't do it to deal with any pain. But all the great characterisation work that is done by Proyas' film is completely undone. The people that Eric slowly hunts down are devoid of identity or personality. In fact, I couldn't even tell you their names, if they had any. The film makes no effort at all to characterise them to any extent, let alone to the level of the 1994 film. Where it does appear to put most of its effort is into developing the love story of Eric and Shelley, giving over the first half of the movie into telling us how they meet and fall for each other. This, however, is still spectacularly inept. The weak idea of a drug-fueled weekends cup in an extremely convenient friend's plush apartment, bolted onto a cliché base of mutual trauma and abuse. This rehab centre, for some reason, allows the sexes to mix, despite apparently being able to track them at any time. It's also the easiest secure facility to break out of in the world. Absolutely laughable. Not that the facility seems to give a damn. Eric and Shelley wander around in the middle of the city with their rehab uniforms, without a care. And Eric and Shelley are just not good people. They are phenomenally selfish, self-obsessed, not caring for the fate of others, involving people at a whim. Eric gets more people killed than he saves, let alone his incredibly bloodthirsty and unfocused rampage. In the comic and the 1994 film, Eric is an altruistic, romantic, kind soul, clean living, a worker, caring, and a thoughtful fiancé. He's not a junkie with a tragic past. We know practically nothing about Shelley. We know that she loves Eric unconditionally, and in the film at least, we know that she cares for Sarah like a big sister. Nothing else is needed. I also need to add that Shelley in the 1994 film does more to endear us to her in the scant minutes she has than FKA Twigs in all of her screen time. Her performance is truly, astonishingly awful, open-mouthed mumbling that doesn't pass for a moment's sincerity. Even the usually excellent Skarsgård is poor, lumbered with the awful one-dimensional character that he's supposed to portray. Most of the exposition or conveniences here are delivered by mobile phone. Eric discovers the information that he needs from a mobile phone that Shelley locked into a safe. He has no moments of real pain, anguish, or reflection, just a half-assed, lame quest to save Shelley's soul. Other than that, it's just bloody action scene after bloody action scene, nothing like the source material, rather than just wanton violence, as Eric goes about his business culminating with him throwing severed heads into a crowd of people. What a hero! Which brings us to the bad guys. As I've said, the grunts and even Rogue's higher henchmen are pretty much devoid of personality or character. They're barely worth mentioning, except to say that one is a corrupt cop and an actual reversal of the roles from the original. ACAB, I guess. When it comes to Rogue himself, I just I just can't. They took the somewhat contestable dark magic mysticism of Micah and Top Dollar and dialed it up to retard, where Rogue is actually a demon defying Satan himself by sending souls to hell in lieu of his own, by mind controlling people. Hang on, that makes God or St. Peter a bit of a prick. You committed murder or suicide. You go to hell. But, my lord, I had no choice in the matter. I was literally controlled by demon. Sorry, no loopholes. Down you go. Fuck you. Very Christian. Now let's examine the moral ramifications of Eric going on a merry slaughter spree against a bunch of security guards that may well be being mind controlled. That's a lot of children left without a father right there. Actually, hang on a moment. If the video shows Rogue controlling Shelley and prompting her to kill someone, which you would have to assume is the case, seeing as that's why they're all so hell-bent on obtaining it. I mean, all we actually see is a knife and him whispering her. Why does Eric lose faith in her? Why does Shelley feel guilt about her actions? Zadie says we can use this to get him. He's not invincible. But you think this is going to stand up in court? What's your compelling argument? Oh, he told me to do it, Your Honour, and he has a mind-controlling voice? The fuck? Let's not even consider the finale, where Eric is beaten until he's not, and then sends Rogue to hell in order to get Shelley back, where she comes back to life before he went and did any of this stuff. In which case Rogue would still be alive? All the guards at the opera are still alive? The numerous people that Eric got killed are still alive?
So now I've gone cross-eyed.
Or do the powers of the Crow now include time travel and immunity to paradoxes? Plus, they still aren't together. What a piece of shit. Not only does it not follow the comic source material, it actively bastardised it. This film is effectively the anti-Crow, an insult. The 1994 film takes some diversions from the comic, it's true, but these are understandable for two reasons. One, the change in medium. What works in a printed visual format does not always work in an audio-visual one. And two, the fact that the film was compromised following Brandon Lee's tragic death. The 2024 version has no such defence. While I can perhaps afford it a minuscule modicum of respect for doing something different and not just being a blind retread, it is so far removed from the themes and atmosphere of the original that I cannot, under any circumstances, consider it an adaptation of the source material. Only a bastardisation, with none of the romance, none of the love, none of the care, nor character. Alex Proyas' evocative directing, sweeping city shots, moody lighting, all absent. The action scenes are boring. CGI blood abounds, going for viscerality over any real sense of stakes or kineticism. There's not a character worth remembering, not a performance worth highlighting, not a moment worth rewatching. The Crow 2024 is one of the very worst adaptations ever to be committed to film. I'm already trying to pretend that it doesn't exist. You have to go some to make the Crow sequels look good, but somehow this travesty manages it. Thanks for watching. I've been Critic, and I'll be back with another video soon.